Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting. My name's Terry Conway, and I'm a member of Anti-Capitalist Resistance. I normally say when I get to chair these meetings that I'm very pleased to be chairing this meeting. Actually, I'm not very pleased at all. I'm angry, I'm upset. And those of you who've had a chance to see the article that I wrote after last Friday's judgment will know that I was one of about 500 people who got to the American Embassy on Friday night in the wake of the overturn of Roe versus Wade. An overturn that we'd been waiting for since the judgment was leaked months back. A judgment that I was convinced, for example, was going to come through on the first day of the rail strike, so that we couldn't get to the American Embassy, not realizing that abortion rights had predicted this and said that if that happened, the protest would be on the Wednesday. Thank you, sisters, for being so well planned, but we had to wait another long 72 hours before we actually got the judgment. But I am pleased that we've got three very powerful speakers with us tonight to set out both what's happened in the States and the need for solidarity, but also the implications of what's happened for women and pregnant people across the globe. Because clearly the decisions that are made by that country have implications for all of us. I first got involved in the National Abortion Campaign, the predecessor of abortion rights, when it was set up. I think there are other women on this call who, like me, were involved in those heady days when the Trade Union Congress called a major demonstration against attacks on abortion rights. And I think one of the things we need to do in Britain is think about how we can step up the fight to get the Labour movement more actively involved in the need to defend bodily autonomy. But you didn't come to hear from me, you came to hear from our amazing speakers. So I'll introduce them in a second. Just to explain, each of our speakers will have about 10 minutes and will then take contributions and questions from the floor. We'll take those in rounds and bring the speakers back after each 3 or 4 contributions, so it's a bit more interactive. And obviously, everybody will be given the space to express their views, but we ask you to do so with respect for everybody fighting to defend bodily autonomy in the current climate. Thank you. And first of all, I'd like to introduce Kerry Abel. Kerry has been involved in abortion rights for a very long time and has spoken on the campaign's behalf on many occasions powerfully. And I'm very pleased that Kerry's with us tonight. Over to you.
Oh, thanks, Terry. Thanks very much for inviting me. There's some familiar faces in the crowd, which is nice. And I'm always really happy to speak to these kinds of audiences. I think it's really important that we're discussing abortion right now. It's what I spend a lot of my time doing, but it's obviously cut through sharply the last week. So abortion rights is the product of a merger of an organisation, the Abortion Law Reform Association, which was formed in the 1930s and was responsible for getting the 1967 Act through, and the National Abortion Campaign, which was a grassroots street-led movement that was formed in the 1970s in the immediate response to the pushbacks to the 67 Act. They merged in 2003 to form Abortion Rights. And I'm really proud that Abortion Rights is the name on the can, for the campaign. And we're the only grassroots campaign in the UK at the moment. Since the 70s, we've been put in quite a defensive mode, but I think that we've become a lot braver about saying that we want decriminalisation. We stand on the shoulders of giants. We have a variety of different sort of ways of campaigning, and we're a feminist organisation. And one of the nice things about feminist organisations is they're collaborative and push hard. We often have disagreements, but that's part of being an organisation that pushes hard for change. One of the things that Diane Monday told me as a story about when the 67 Act was enacted was that even in Parliament, when they were celebrating, she wouldn't let her campaigners have full glasses of champagne, because she said that we'd only done half the job. The 67 Act legalised abortion in certain circumstances and put the decision in the hands of the doctors. It should be in the hands of women and pregnant people who need it, and that is what decriminalisation needs to do. And that's where we need to go. And I think when people are so shocked now about the decision to roll back Roe v. Wade in America, which has global implications. I'll talk a little bit about it. Obviously, you've got Zora to talk about it as well, but it has global implications. The antis are globally networked, and so we need to be globally networked as well. And that's why we are giving full solidarity. When we heard the news of the leak at the beginning of May, we organised an immediate demonstration at the US Embassy. We organised a march from Parliament to the US Embassy in mid-May, and then we organised something on Friday night as well, which we had been planning to do. We want you to know that we're about to launch a demonstration alongside the activists in the US who've called it for Saturday, the 9th of July. So we're going to be marching from Trafalgar Square to the US Embassy on Saturday, the 9th of July. And to make sure that we are not clashing with Trans Pride, we will be doing it from 4 p.m. I'm going to put something in the chat, just a link, so that if you're not already part of our campaign, you can get notifications of the action alerts that we're putting out. And we put out a weekly newsletter every Friday morning. And I just think they're very easy bite-sized information. So if nothing else, you can read that on Friday morning and get updated. So I want to say this is quite emotive for me, and things have happened very quickly. So I'm not as polished as I would like to be, but bear with me. I'm going to try and run through this. So as we all know, I think I'd sort of planned a speech that explained some of this, but as we know, the US Supreme Court decided on one of the most important cases on reproductive rights in decades. So Jackson Women's Health Organization, which was the last remaining abortion clinic in Mississippi, put a challenge towards the state law that was passed that banned abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy, including in cases of rape and incest. And the Supreme Court determined not just on the fate of that clinic, but on the monumental 1973 ruling Roe v. Wade, which legalised abortion nationwide and legalised it on the basis of privacy. So an attack on privacy is also an attack on the right to get contraception, on the right to equal marriage, on even things like being able to decide for yourself on your healthcare decisions, the right to refuse healthcare treatment. Let's face it, this is because the Trump administration stacked the Supreme Court with right-wing anti-choice appointments. This is a plan they've had for decades. They've been putting judges in the lower courts for decades now. And it's a strategy employed by the Republican Party. there was always an inherent weakness in Roe v. Wade because it was the product of a legal ruling, not a federal law. And it is the Democrats' shame that they have not passed, they've not codified abortion rights into law. And that's something that it is coming back to bite them. But also what I want to say to this meeting kind of clearly, that rolling back abortion rights is racially motivated. It's affecting women of colour and the poorest communities, the most vulnerable communities. We've always known that. We've always known that rich women can get abortions and poor women can't. And it's a desire by the right to change the demographics of the US from a trend moving away from, there is a trend moving away from a white majority, and because of the necessity for, this is an anti-capitalist resistance meeting, so I think that everyone understands that because they've relied on immigrant labour, they're now sort of clutching their pearls about a dominant country of colour. So this is where we are. And I think that this has been a huge shock. I have to say, I was a bit disappointed at the level of resistance after the leak happened. But I think that the decision this week has really shocked people. And I think there will be a huge fight going on. And thousands of activists turned up on the steps of the Supreme Court to show their force within hours of the leaked draft and within hours of the ruling. We have had, large numbers of US citizens who are living in London and around country come to our demonstrations. So we're sort of in solidarity with them, but I think that we also need to say loud and clear that we won't accept any rollbacks here. And I've definitely heard murmurings of similar sort of right-wing antis in the UK try to push buttons to roll back rights as well. So I think that we need to demonstrate just as keenly to send that message that it's not acceptable here. I don't think it's a massive surprise that the Supreme Court, just five of them were able to roll back decades of rights. I don't think it's that much of a surprise that they are out of touch with US society. Out of 114 of them, only 6 have ever been anything other than white men. And I'm including the newest Jackson Brown appointee. But at least 2/3 of the US population are in favour of women's right to choose. So we have to do the work to make sure that they are represented and to demonstrate our solidarity. I think it's an understatement to say it's a significant setback for abortion rights, not just in the US, but it will embolden anti-choice activists that are making their voices heard in Poland, in Malta, etc., where the struggle for access is already quite desperate. And I think any chink in the legislative armour that undermines the right to privacy makes access more difficult, and it puts abortion funding out of reach that will impact poorer and marginalised women and pregnant people and will encourage yet more anti-abortion legislation and action. We know that the inaction and the link with the gun control lobby, anti-gun control lobby, shows us that this isn't about being pro-life at all. It's about policing our bodies. It's about control over women. And the struggle for women's liberation and the fight to control our own bodies needs to be a fight, needs to be a struggle. Abortion rights wants to commit solidarity to the US and say squarely that we don't want any rollbacks to our rights. And there's a "bands off our bodies" slogan, which I think says quite a lot. I just wanted to go a little bit into why we should care over here and how the movement is a sort of globally networked movement. The anti-choice brigade, or the anti-choice religious right, is numerically small, and they are on the fringes of society. And we know that in the UK, they sort of operate through very fringe evangelical churches and a few Catholic backwaters. We know that they're not even the majority of mainstream Christian faith. but they are emboldened in the US, and we see that here as well. I attended a counter protest to March for Life in March, and they were buoyant then. I think it was gross to see, actually, after the announcement of the ban in Texas. And in the UK, 3 anti-choice amendments were added to the Health and Care Bill heard in Parliament in January. So they're highly motivated. We saw Danny Kruger sort of stand up and commit his anti-choice views to Hansard recently, which I think is quite odd, but he's clearly setting a sort of marker down, and it will encourage more people to come forward. So it's important that we kind of, oh, sorry, I've gone back. I don't want there to be any room for complacency. I don't think anyone here is complacent, but we have to meet their protests with counter protests. We have to organise, letters to MPs. We have to do all the basic lobbying work, and we have to make sure that our supporters are armed with the facts and the arguments to make the case effectively to our MPs, our unions and our colleagues. And I think this being armed with the facts is really important as a sort of generational thing, because so I'm in my 40s, and I think that even sort of my generation don't necessarily know it's a problem until they've gone through the process and they come to me and say, did you know I had to plead my case, I had to get 2 doctors' signatures, etc. So I think there is a sort of slight complacency about how legal abortion is. But there's a really powerful story from a student that I came across recently, who, she's not a stupid woman. She's a university student. She got pregnant. She didn't want to be. She went online to find out where she could go and get an abortion, where the clinic was. She was based in Glasgow. Obviously, there are clinics in Glasgow, but she only found a story on the internet of a clinic in Edinburgh where anti-choice harassment was happening, and she thought that was the only clinic she could go to. So she got on a train to Edinburgh and made an appointment. They couldn't give her an appointment, and told her that she could go to Glasgow and get one through her GP. And she just learned a real lesson there. And I think that even though the cat's out of the bag with abortion pills available and a network of people who will help those who need abortions online, the way information is controlled online is quite dangerous. And I think that we just can't rely on information being available. We have to look at how it's made available. And I know that on the one hand, TikTok has a really great trend at the moment where people are putting the Chainsmokers song up, which is When We Go Down Together, and giving people information and support. But on the other hand, Facebook and Instagram are shoving messages over, shoving danger messages over information about getting abortion pills in much more voracious way than they were for guns or other illicit substances. So I think that information is the religious right understand how to get information across as well. And although they're numerically small, they are well funded and well linked up politically. I don't want to talk too much, but the other thing that's happening in the UK is a sort of assault on our human rights, and we are going to have to assert the right for the right to abortion to be a human right. It is a human right, and it's also a healthcare right. So we need to be making those arguments clearly and without that much nuance. We're just going to have to be really clear about it and get those points across. So I'd really urge you to do a couple of things. I'm going to put a couple of kind of things in the chat, because I think we need support and we need coordinated support. And if you're part of a union branch or a student branch, it would be really great if you could affiliate to abortion rights, not just for the money, but the money helps. But I think for the political statement that we need as many people as possible to be part of our movement, and we need to consolidate the movement. We don't have the funding that the religious right has, so we're solely funded by our individual members and our affiliates. And then please join in our actions and stay kind of on top of of some of the things that we need your support with, whether it be writing to your MP, signing petitions, coming out on demonstrations, organising demonstrations. All of those things will be needing to happen in the next few months. We're going to have a summer of rage.
Thank you so much, Kerry. That was great. Lots of information, and we'll make sure that the links in the chat are sent to people with the link to the video afterwards. So I'm very pleased to, well, I'm very pleased at last to meet Beth Douglas, who I first discovered on Twitter through a friend who explained to me the amazing work Beth's been doing in Scotland as part of the campaign, which I think is also very important in the light of what Kerry's talked about the antis in not only in England and Wales, but also in Scotland, where we've seen an increasing harassment of people using healthcare facilities, both abortion clinics, but also trans health outlets. And the whole question of the campaign for buffer zones, I think, is a very important struggle. So over to Beth to talk about her involvement in this campaign.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's great to be here. Some already fantastic discussion already. So no, I'm really happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me. So as Terry said, my name is Beth Douglas. I would sort of present myself as an activist around body autonomy for a number of reasons, and I'm here today just to speak about a little bit more about the campaigns for buffer zones up in Scotland. At the moment for the Scottish Parliament, there's a bill going through to impose national buffer zones around all healthcare settings, as well as a little bit about the solidarity between groups in this fight as well, because in order to win this and to face off and defeat this giant enemy, because yes, like the religious right is a small group, but it's a very powerful one at that, and in order for us to defeat them, we all need to come together. So my name's Beth. I'm a trans woman. Basically, that means I no longer identify with the sex or gender that I was assigned at birth. And it's pretty obvious that I'll never need an abortion. Not that you need to have that eligibility to defend someone's right to choose. But I would argue that it's incredibly important for trans people and the wider queer community to fight for body autonomy. In America, Ireland and Northern Ireland are only a recent handful of examples of where the trans community, but particular trans women in particular, has strongly came out in favour for the right to choose. And hopefully by the end of this talk, I can show you why it's a little bit obvious why that's the case. So my experience of activism around abortion rights dates back quite a bit. So in 2018, we started an occupation at the NUS conference, the National Union of Students. We occupied the stage in order to try and, force the organisation to debate and pass policies around sex work and abortion rights. I've also been involved in marches in Ireland and Northern Ireland. I do counter demos outside my local health clinic that gets protested by not just religious preachers, but I would qualify them as hate preachers, and I'll talk a bit more about them later on as well. I should probably say that if you are ever going to try and counter-test forced birthers outside your clinic, please talk to your health clinic first, get permission with them, see what they're comfortable with, because at the end of the day, you don't want to try and escalate what's happening right outside the doors of healthcare settings that offer abortion-related healthcare. When it was leaked, me and some other trans women, we held 2 demos outside the US consulate in Edinburgh, and I also helped deal with some of the campaigns around the buffer zone consultation that happens in Scotland. Just this Saturday for Pride as well, we managed to get a radical bloc to deviate away from the main march. The main march, or Edinburgh Pride, basically signed up to have ridiculous sponsors in fossil fuels and made incredibly anti-trade union comments about the train strikes in RMT. So we thought it was very important to break away from that march. And first we went to the RMT picket line, which was incredibly good. And then we went to the US consulate again to protest Roe v. Wade as well. There was about 300 of us that came to it. There's still some pictures and videos of it on Twitter. It was a fantastic day. So why are the trans community heavily invested in this? I guess the first would be that trans men, non-binary people, and intersex people are also having their abortion rights stripped away from them as well in America. It's not just a fight for cis women. Some people who may be defined as gender critical or maybe a little bit anti-trans will often use this as an opportunity to sort of divert everyone away from the sort of argument that everyone who needs an abortion should be able to have one, to then argue about, well, what about the identities of trans men and binary people, and then is it valid? And I would like really say that sort of diversion of arguments isn't helpful to the overall movement. We need to be inclusive, or else we're just going to spend our time arguing about identities all day and not how like everyone that wants to have an abortion should be able to get one. Yes, you know, this fight is a women's rights issue, 100%, but it's also an issue for trans brothers, non-binary siblings, and intersex people who deserve to be offered abortions in a private, timely, and safe manner. Another reason why abortion rights is a matter to trans people is about our opponents as well. The Heritage Foundation is an extremely religious right-wing American think tank that has took a leading role in the conservative movement. They came about really at the time of the presidency of Ronald Reagan, and has, like, you know, completely steamrolled and is still very much a power player today as well. A lot of people would label them as a hate group. It still doesn't stop BBC Scotland from platforming them as they did recently, which is absolutely shocking because they wanted balance around buffer zones, and it was just absolutely so horrible to seeing the BBC invite around those type of people, those type of politics. The Alliance Defending Freedom, the ADF, or the Heritage Foundation as well, have high profile relationships with gender critical activists like Gary Powell, the founder of the LGBT Alliance, or Kelly J. Keane, or aka Posey Parker. She was behind the sort of the transphobic dog whistle campaign, Adult Human Female. Even Julie Bindel has a high-profile public relationship with Jennifer Lal, who's the founder and president of the Center of Bioethics and Culture Network, which is again another religious right-wing think tank that argues against reproductive technology. Lal has also worked with an organization called Alliance Defending Freedom, which opposes equal marriage, says that queer and trans people are more likely to be pedophiles, and campaigns against women's right to healthcare. So we can see that there is some crossover, but just to double down on this point and really hit it, what about home right here in the UK? Well, gender critical activists have just recently attacked Gillett competency. Gillett competency, for anybody who doesn't know, is allows minors autonomy over healthcare, important healthcare decisions. So that could be the decisions for that child to take testosterone blockers because they think they might be trans, or that child to get a vaccine when their parents don't want it, or if that child is pregnant, they should be able to get an abortion. These are all things that are safeguarded by Gillett competency, and has been under attack just because it also provides that mechanism for trans kids to get puberty blockers. So we can see that there's a crossover. I could also talk about Carolyn Fisk, who is head of Women Uniting, a founder of If You Want My Ex, Respect My Sex campaign, a campaign to ask as many politicians as possible, what is a woman? So rather than getting politicians to commit to actual things that would help women, it's about cheesy sort of like, tell us what a woman is, and to try and reduce women down to the fact that the idea that women are just body-making machines, that they're just reproduce the next civilization after next civilization, which isn't feminist to me, and any self-respecting feminist should not reduce women down to her reproductive organs as well. Carolyn has also stated that homosexual acts are sinful and that abortion isn't healthcare. Dennis Noel Canva, who set up a gender critical group called the Gay Men's Network, has also said that he prefers AIDS to the activism done by LGBT plus networks like Mermaids and Stonewall. So as well as similar enemies that the trans community, the trans movement and the feminist movement have, we often encounter the exact same arguments against both movements. So for example, if this may have seemed familiar for you, that maybe you're thinking about going and you're getting an abortion, and the arguments that some wankers will come across to you and put it as like, they'll say that, oh, you'll regret it. It does irreversible damage. It's not healthy and it's not healthcare. And on some occasions, you'll be warning that you're condemning your soul to hell. And when that doesn't work and you go away and get your healthcare anyway, like you rightfully should, they'll demonize you. They present you as a predator. You want to take other vulnerable people down the same dark path that you did. If that sounds familiar, all of those arguments are used against abortion, but they're also used against trans people when it comes to surgery and HRT as well. So I just thought that was really interesting. Also in the UK, in order to get an abortion, you need 2 trained professionals, and you need to convince them that you want an abortion. It's not really, it is somewhat a decision that you make yourself, and it should be, but you need to really like double down and convince these doctors that you want it. The only other type of healthcare that really does that in Britain is trans healthcare. You need 2 physicians, and it's not just a case of like simply you going like, right, I know the risks, I know the rewards of it, I want to do this. It is you having to sort of do a dance and play the role that they want you to play. And as Kerry said earlier, that decision should be down to the patient and not the doctor. Scotland also rarely performs abortions way past the first trimester, and often sends a lot of pregnant people down to England, because even though it's legal here, the Scottish government hasn't funded the right, hasn't put the funding in place to allow the abortion up to the legal limit. So that means the exact same sort of situation that we see in Northern Ireland, where Northern Ireland had to send women to England to get an abortion. That's still happening, and it's not just happening there, it's happening in other parts of the UK as well. But this is really all down to the biggest reason why these 2 fights are linked. It is a fight around what we can say, that what we can do to our own bodies. It would make no sense for me as a trans woman to say, well, I should to make all the decisions of if I have surgery, if I have medical interventions, if I have HRT, and these should be all my decisions, and it shouldn't be related to any doctor at all. The buck should stop at me. Then why would I think that someone who needs an abortion shouldn't be able to make their own decision of whether they should have one or not? So I think both of these fights are incredibly linked. And I know that, that there is, you could say that the religious far right are playing a blinder, because for the past 5 to 10 years especially, they've been trying to break up the LGBT community and the feminist movement and try and pit us against each other. They've been trying to say that these are predators in your spaces, and they've been trying to distract us a lot. Even right now to this day, from my organising in Scotland, there are still gender critical activists that have their own civil liberties that are slowly being taken away from them, and still they have been radicalised and given misinformation that no, the true fight at the moment isn't around your reproductive rights, it's about trans women used in your spaces and that. So I think really we need to come together, and we need to come together strong and fast, because when we're all united, when we're all come together, we will start winning, and winning for good. If my idea is, if the case of someone's body autonomy is protected for one group in one part of the world, then that strengthens the overall concept of body autonomy for everyone everywhere. So that's why I see both struggles linked. The fight for body autonomy for trans people is also the fight for body autonomy for cis women. And, you know, I think it's incredibly important that we are united and that we keep on going and we defeat this, not just for everything that is happening in America, because unfortunately American politics is global politics and will undoubtedly have an effect on us. But already in Scotland at my local Sandyford clinic, as soon as that potential decision leaked, the religious right randomly in Scotland of all places were just like, right, now's our time to shine. And they became invigorated to protest outside of health clinics. So they definitely feel emboldened, they feel empowered, and it's up to us to stop them in our tracks. So thank you very much for coming along. I'm going to put in a link as well. This is a link to bufferzones.scot. This is the consultation around buffer zones that is currently happening in Scotland. I would really encourage you all to click on that link, go fill out the consultation. You don't need to be in Scotland to fill it in. So even if you're like, say you're listening from America, you can still sign this in, even though it's legislation that mostly just impacts Scotland, you can still do it. And hopefully, what I really hope is when Scotland puts buffer zones in place, that will strengthen the case for the rest of the UK to do it soon, because I see no one, although I'll back the right to protest until the cows come home, but the link is not active. Please repost. I will try. It's probably because it has a .scot link, unfortunately. I tried again and it's not active, so you'll have to copy and paste that or just type in bufferzones.scot. But yeah, hopefully when we pass that in Scotland, and I think it will pass, don't get me wrong, I think the type of religious opposition that we're going to see in the next couple of months is going to be, oh, thank you very much, Jess, it's going to be incredibly tough, but we're going to have to ride that out. Because I think when we finally get this in Scotland, hopefully the case for getting it everywhere else in the rest of the UK becomes stronger as well. Because even though the right to protest is incredibly important, nobody should be harassed or intimidated when trying to just get basic healthcare for anyone. And really, sexual health clinics, they don't only just perform abortions, but a range of care: rape counselling, trans healthcare, menopause healthcare, HIV healthcare. And these are the type of patients that are all being harassed when coming in to get a treatment, and they're classified as murderers of babies. And it's also a trade union issue as well. A lot of our staff are going in, and we often forget that when religious rhetoric, right-wing rhetoric like this gets flung about, it endangers our healthcare staff as well. And there is a long history of not just attacks in America around this, but also here in Scotland as well. So I really hope, even though this is awful, I hope this helps mobilize us and fight back and get some wins, as well as showing solidarity to our American cis sisters, trans brothers, and non-binary siblings. Thank you for allowing me to talk. Cheers.
Thanks so much, Beth. And it's now is my great pleasure to introduce our final speaker tonight. Again, I'm pleased to meet Zora. We've been kind of talking online, but Zora lives in Michigan, and Zora has been very heavily involved in campaigning there, and she's going to tell you about herself as well as about what's going on in the States. So over to you, Zora.
Thank you, Terry. Hi, everybody. So yes, my name is Zora Monico, previously known as Zora Bowens, but now it's Monico as a liberation for my ancestors' slave owners' last name in the United States. I work with the Michigan Coalition for Reproductive Liberation in Michigan. That was, I said that twice, whatever. We in Michigan face one of the most restrictive abortion bans currently pending because of a Planned Parenthood lawsuit that's going on right now. But we do have a trigger law that would basically like make abortions completely illegal. I'm pleased to be speaking with you all right now. It's crazy to talk to you all internationally about the issue of abortion rights and bodily autonomy in America, but I'm grateful because the solidarity between countries is needed right now. And I have ideas of what we can do together, but at the end of everything I'm gonna say. But I am speaking across the world, so I think I might have to really explain to you guys what is going on in America truly. So let me be frank. America's fucked up right now. The overturning of Roe versus Wade is tragic for many reasons. The ruling sets precedent to take away rights, any rights previously ruled on by the Supreme Court, specifically based on the Fifth Amendment, which is what they use to overturn Roe versus Wade. It's the right to due process, which is the right to life, liberty, and property, right? And that's the issue with the initial ruling of Roe versus Wade, was that the ruling was dangling on a vague interpretation to what the right to life is, right? It's kind of ironic in this situation. But the next right to be taken away is going to be gay marriage. They're coming after the LGBTQIA+ community, and it has already started. There are many senators who say gay marriage should be a state right, i.e. easier to ban. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, for example, has already said that any ruling decided using the Fifth Amendment needs to be revisited. That includes gay marriage, but that does not stop them from overturning other laws that were ruled, or other rulings that were made using other amendments. There's now a precedent for any judicial ruling to be overturned. That includes Brown versus the Board of Education, which ended segregated schools, something that my grandparents fought against. Senator John Cornyn of Texas, and I'm sorry if I don't know his didn't get that last name right, but I really don't give a fuck right now. In regards to Roe versus Wade, said, now Du Plessis versus Ferguson and Brown versus the Board of Education, signaling that he wants segregation back. That was not a misspeak, that was a warning. They will be coming for Miranda rights, which is our right to understand our legal due process when police arrest you, and they've already started to do so in different states. They will also be coming for Tinker versus Des Moines, which allows students to peacefully protest in their schools, and much more. It's a very scary time for America right now. 11 out of 50 states have banned abortion completely, and 11 states are pending their decisions, my state included. That means about 100 million people without direct access to abortions right now. States are also working on laws to ban contraceptives like morning after pill, birth control, IUDs, and they're making it a felony to have them. These women, people with uterus, non-binary people, trans sisters will go to jail. And when you are a felony in America, you also lose the right to vote. When you're a felon in America, sorry, you also lose the right to vote. They're also making it a felony to miscarry your child. So, yeah. By the First Amendment, we have separation of church and state. So how laws are being passed, regardless, is telling about how true we are to anything we say about the principles we have in America. And let me make things just a little bit more confusing about our system. Roe versus Wade was overturned by a Supreme Court, which has 3 new justices put in place by a president that lost the popular vote, meaning that most Americans did not want them to be president, and overturned a ruling that 61% of Americans want. If that doesn't sound like a very small majority of people working against the popular opinion of the country, I don't know what does. I want to make it clear that America is not a democracy. It is an oligarchy ruled by corporations and billionaires. It does not matter what we want. And statistics have shown that it does not matter how we vote. It does not matter what we do. It's going to be what they want. And they may give us a little piece of a pie to make us happy every once in a while. American ideology is so lacking in empathy that pro-birth people would rather fight for someone to give birth rather than figure out how to fix a system of children who are homeless, who are hungry, children and parents who are on welfare, foster kids who have high rates of abuse, et cetera, et cetera. They don't care about, they're not pro-life, they're pro-birth because they don't care about that kid after it comes out of the womb. What about those kids' rights to life and liberty? And this is the saddest part, to be honest. Like, it's all sad, but just also thinking about rape. 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted. Every woman I know in my life has been sexually assaulted. In many states, there's no exceptions, even in the case of rape. And to make things worse, even if it makes things worse, most rapes go unreported in America, which means that a rapist can fight in court to get custody of their child if the rape goes unreported. And that person could not get an abortion. One thing I want to highlight is that there's a few groups of people that will be particularly impacted by this decision to overturn Roe versus Wade. I'm going to start with Black people and people of color because of the systematic oppression. And I hate to use that word because I feel like people don't understand it. So I'll just break it down a little bit. Historical events like redlining, segregation, immigrant degrading laws, and a long history of racism have left immigrants, people of color, and Black people in economically downturned situations. And America is purposefully keeping us poor. These people will not be able to fly out of state. And I think you guys can understand because you guys were talking about Scotland, people from Scotland flying to England, right? It's kind of like state to state, right? These people will not be able to do that. They will not be able to get a train, and with the damn gas prices, they will not be able to drive. But I also want to highlight another group of people that will be affected, and it really comes from the systematic oppression of classism in America, which is truly the issue at hand. The system of racism is purposefully trying to keep us divided from a common enemy, which is classism. Poor people will be the most affected. Poor people, poor POC, poor white people, poor, it doesn't matter. Just poor people will not be able to fly, get a train, go to Canada, go to Mexico. And young people who cannot leave outside of their parents' jurisdiction will be affected. I want us to pay attention to something in particular though. America's population is declining. And we are a capitalistic society. We need workers, we need a middle class, which salary is barely surviving, and we need a poor low class to work mundane jobs that no one really wants. The ban on abortion is to keep our population up for economic means. It's for economic means and it's for religious purposes. And it's a violation of our rights to life and liberty. I truly do think that if America continues on this path, and I really, really want to say this, I do think that we will be on the brink of a civil war if they continue to take rights away. Many people are already considering taking up arms. I am, and I recommend it to everybody that I talk to. That's how tense the situation is getting, and how apparent it is how the cards are being played. I think that you guys from the UK, should start joining, and just every country, honestly, should start joining arms with the people of America to protect us. We don't know what that might look like, you having to bring us to your countries at a certain point. But currently, I think it really looks like putting pressure on the United States, putting pressure on the United Nations, making it apparent that the United Nations will be divided if the United States does not comply with human rights, because it's a clear violation of human rights and it's a clear violation of international law. So we hope that you will join us in pressuring your country pressuring the United States, pressuring your parliament, pressuring whatever governmental system you have, and just as we would do for you. And please stay connected because we need to do this fight together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zora. That was really, really powerful. And moving. As you will see, I let the speakers go on slightly longer than I said, but I
know, I'm sorry.
No, all
20 minutes.
3 of you. I couldn't cut any of you off. But we now do have some time. So I'd like to see people who want to speak. I'd ask people to keep to 3 minutes so we can get as many people as possible in. So if possible, raise your electronic hands because I can't see everybody. But can I see who wants to come in? I know it's a bit overwhelming. Okay, I've got Pete.
It's just a simple question to Zora. There was a report here, sorry, there was a report here about protesters against the Supreme Court decision being attacked by both police and anti-abortionists. And there was also part of that report was that a car had driven into one of the protests, and some states have changed their law to allow people to drive into protesters. Can you sort of tell us what's going on from that angle of thing?
Thanks. Hang on, Zora. Let's take 3 or 4 contributions, and then we'll bring the speakers back.
Okay.
Liz.
Thanks, Terry. Really a question for Kerry. You talk about being in your 40s. I'm in my 70s. Some of us who are older know about things like illegal abortions, backstreet abortions. We also know about the impact it had on women's employment position when you didn't have reproductive rights and when you could be sort of discounted for jobs, training, promotion, serious positions, permanent jobs, because you might get pregnant, might have a baby, because you didn't have reproductive rights. You know, we remember like before 1975 in this country, before the employment protection legislation, when we could just be sacked for having a baby. You know, how do we get some of this knowledge across to explain why reproductive rights are so important for women's liberation? And my other question, I remember in 1979 we had a big TUC demonstration in defense of the 67 Act. Do we need something like that, or perhaps some big conference or event to organise through trade unions and others? I don't think we'll get much out of the Labour Party at the moment because it seems a bit of a dead loss. But you know, something to make people more aware of why this issue is so central, you know, as a human right, central for many groups, but you know, why it's so important for the status of women in society. That's my question.
Thanks, Liz. Susan.
I really want to thank the speakers. It has been an amazing meeting, and I want to thank you. I mean, one of the things that you sit there and Zora raised it is help is not just saying, oh, okay, well, we're standing there. I mean, although it's important, but it's something that we must do, and we have to be prepared to do, because this is not a small thing what's going in the US. I've been referring to it as like theocratic fascism, because that's what it really clearly looks like to me. And I have to be honest, I was in the US when it was overturned. I was hoping to be in Britain because I had this whole thing staged of what I wanted to do. But luckily, I was with people who cared, and we went to a local protest. You know, you're in a situation, and we were talking about it earlier, where it's like somebody has passed away. You're expecting the death. You know it's coming. But when it comes, it doesn't stop the grief. And, you know, the difference between death and this is there's no bargaining. There's nothing that we can do. I mean, listening to CNN literally lie and use if Roe is overturned when it was evident that it was going to be overturned. And what that does is it deviates away from building a movement. Oh, there's a possible fix. There isn't a fix. Okay, and I was just going to raise the point that Sandra raised about disabled women. And, you know, when we look at the history of the US, we need to look at the history of sterilization abuse as part of reproductive rights, because who did this happen to? It happens to women of color, it happens to disabled women, and it happens to poor women. And these are the people who have even less say or less control than people who have money, of course, because people who have money can actually go and do things. And the failures of the Democratic Party to actually do something over decades to get rid of the Hyde Amendment, to actually codify abortion in law. And then they say, come and vote for me. Well, why the hell? What are they going to do for us? They've done nothing for decades. I'm even angrier at them than I am about people who I expect this type of crap from. So I just want you to say thank you to everybody, and we really appreciate it. So thank you for coming.
Thanks, Susan. I'll take Roland and then I'll bring the speakers back.
Thank you, Terry. I wanted to ask Zora in particular about resistance to the new ruling. I remember in France some years ago, around when there was a big debate on abortion, a number of prominent women went public with accounts of illegal abortions that they had had in an effort to get themselves charged. And I wonder, for instance, if anything like that was likely to happen in the States. If there's, I think it was you that put in the chat about organizing bridges from Detroit to Canada, but what sort of resistance there'll be, I hope, for women who are trying to get abortions. I was reading the other day about apparently the only clinic in Alabama that was offering help to people who need abortions was one that was run jointly by a Muslim and a Jewish gynecologist. And of course, neither of these have any allegiance to Christian evangelicalism. But I wondered what was happening with any doctors who were preparing to resist this. And I must say, as an aside, by the way, the only time I ever bumped into my mother at a demonstration was at the 1979 TUC abortion rights demo. It did worry me why she might have wanted to be there, but I mean, it was, in fact, she wasn't highly political, but that really moved her to politics. So it just occurred to me. Thanks.
Thanks, Roland. Okay. Kerry, do you want to?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that kind of covered a spectrum, and I don't want to overlap on anything that Zora or Beth might say, but I think Liz Lawrence, who's been an abortion rights supporter and MAC supporter for a long time, probably knows what I'm going to say, but the trade union movement has been critically important to making sure that we've kept our abortion rights in this country. And unfortunately, it's not written properly. It's not written up in history because it's probably because it's women, probably because it's working class women. But the 1979 TUC demonstration, which had 100,000 people at it, was one of, well, the first and maybe one of the only demonstrations that was about an issue that wasn't pay terms and conditions. And they came together partly because of the work of NAC, which went into branch meetings and explained to people, you know, what was at stake and why it was a working class issue, for all of the reasons that we've already said, and talking about the US. And I think that the lesson that we should learn is we have to be ever present. We have to talk these things through and explain to the next generation, or just talk to each other about how these things happen, because we're in danger of losing some of our history and losing some of our tactics and knowledge if we don't do that. The antis would really love it if we just shut up and just had abortions without telling anyone, in the same way that they used to say to the LGBTQ community, like, you know, do what you want at home, but don't bring it out here. And this kind of stigmatization of what 1 in 3 women will do in their lifetime is something that we have to fight against. I think a lesson from when they won the repeal referendum in Ireland, which I was quite confident they would win, because, you know, 1 in 3 women have abortions, and that means that somebody has to help them with childcare. They have to help them with money to travel. They have to swap shifts, take time off work. They have to, you know, pull all these things together, get somewhere to stay. And so all of these people, that's why there was Farmers for Choice, that's why there were Grandparents for Choice, all of these groups, because they were forced to talk about it, because it was on the, it was a political decision they all had to make. It really uncovered all of these reasons, and everyone loves someone who's had an abortion. And the more that we confront each other with it, which is why we need to talk about it in the workplace, and also why I said, if you've got your branch, please put a motion to affiliate to abortion rights, because we need to have this wide network of support. And the trade union movement, for all its, I work for the trade union movement, I am a member of the union, for all its kind of slowness sometimes and kind of plodding along, it understands that you have to support the right for abortion. You have to support abortion rights in the downtime as well as now when it gets hairy. So I think that they've consistently supported us politically. I remember when we had to fight the sex election, and honestly, I turned up on the Monday morning of the vote. We hadn't had enough support from MPs. We hadn't had enough, we didn't feel like we changed enough minds, and the people who turned up, who'd been going and talking to all of their political contacts with the trade union movement, and that's what turned it around, and we changed the numbers of the vote. So we have to be having those conversations and maybe writing them up, because it's a sort of gap in the internet history. I wanted to say a couple of things about what support looks like. Support is political. I don't want support to just be everyone going and individually funding abortion funds. That can't be the only way we do it. It's too piecemeal, it's too sticking plaster. We have to have the political campaign and not just descend into just helping people get abortions. As important as that is, we need to keep the fight up. I think that there's a sort of lesson that should have been learned maybe from America, where they just kind of made sure that poor, the charity angle of making sure that poor women and pregnant people could get abortions, and then no one said anything more. We have to make this a political fight. And same point really around disabled rights. I think there's a really worrying, I know disabled people are concerned that anti-choice people are getting inside their campaign and picking off certain types of disabilities to campaign for. And I know people in the Downs community are unsettled by them using the Downs community as the poster people for disability generally. It is just anti-choice people doing it for their own gain, and we need to be linking up. It has to come from disabled people themselves to make those points, and we have to make them very carefully. But that's something that we should watch. We have an abortion system where the time limit is 24 weeks. I don't necessarily agree, with these arbitrary rules on viability, but we have a system where there's also later abortion available on a case-by-case basis, and that's very important to keep it on a case-by-case basis, and that gives room for really nuanced, difficult discussions to happen. And it's something that's in our abortion law that isn't in the rest of Europe. I've fought, as part of abortion rights, to keep that sort of later abortion. We don't want to sell that off just for better access at earlier stages. So that's a discussion we've had as well in the movement.
Thanks, Kerry. Beth, do you have anything to?
Yeah, I was wondering if Zora could go first. I just don't want to eat into anybody else's answers, if that makes sense. I'm very happy to go last.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll take another round.
Okay, so in regards to the first question about the, I guess, situation with the police and the cars, yes, there actually are states that have made it easier to hit people with your cars. And yes, I'm not surprised, because it is sadly so common for people nowadays to run people over with their cars at protests. Like, there have been many accounts of this happening, even in Detroit where I live, by the police. So, but as far as the how tense it is between the police and certain communities, I cannot say right now, because, well, one, I'm not in those communities, but two, I just haven't been getting those reports yet about how tense it is with the police and the people. As far as Michigan, I think it's okay right now, but that's because last year we had a lot of issues with the police, and like we had to get like literally a restraining order against them that a judge granted. So yeah. But as far as what are we doing for resistance? So there are networks in the United States for getting people state to state. There's, like I said, I'm trying to build a network between Canada and Detroit. I imagine that New York is also doing the same thing, since Justin Trudeau said that Canada will allow people to come for abortions. We have abortion access funds, obviously. Constant protesting, like we literally are protesting like every week, at least 3 protests a week in Detroit alone, organized by different people with great turnouts. But, you know, my group, we are already taking disruptive measures. Like before Roe versus Wade was overturned, we interrupted a House of Representatives meeting. We went to the state capitol, went to one of their meetings, did not let them proceed with business as usual, chanted until we got kicked out and someone got arrested for trespassing. But there's other groups that are like interrupting basketball games. You know, we actually blocked the bridge to Canada last Saturday to just cause major disturbance, basically. But now we're actually thinking of more in terms of economic means. Like when you look at what Hong Kong did in terms of not supporting mainland Chinese businesses, disrupting their MTR subway system, which most of the proceeds went back to mainland China, this kind of thing. Like we're thinking about how can we disrupt economically, because that is the thing that gets people who don't care to actually care. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks so much, Beth.
Thank you so much. Right, I've got a lot here, so I'm going to rattle it down and hopefully be under 3 minutes. With regards to that question on the police and how does that tie into the UK? Police are anti-abortionists. Like, I want to hear otherwise. They're anti-abortionists. Do not trust the police in your organising around this. If they try to gather any intelligence, tell them to fuck off. Just like not even that long ago in Ireland and Northern Ireland, when women would be out organising demos around abortion rights, police, and this is British police, would go to their homes and try and look for abortion medication, and then we'll use that to detain them. So like that is very recent evidence around, you know, not only just police general, but police Scotland's own police in Britain's own opinions around abortion related healthcare. So please, like, I'm talking to like a meeting of communists. I think I'm going to be okay with this, but like a reminder, don't trust the police in this organizing. And yes, there is like that incredibly vibrant need for trade union solidarity. And it's a very pity that Labour is in the sorry mess that it is in today. But I think RMT has shown us in the past weeks that trade unions are becoming powerful again. They're becoming stronger. I think we're finally out of that phase where we just trashed like anti-trade union rhetoric. I think has peaked and it's starting to go down again. And as my point about earlier, this is also a trade union issue when it comes to dangerous rhetoric around abortion. So for example, my own healthcare clinic that gets hate preachers. The hate preachers made a video saying that they were carrying out dead babies' bodies, and that these NHS healthcare workers use them as trophies with these kids' remains. That is the type of rhetoric that will get a worker killed. Last year in Edinburgh, a pro-choice activist got hit by a car. That's as early as last year. So we got to be wary. We've got to be, our healthcare staff is here to protect us. Let's protect them. And I think that's the best way of roping in our trade union comrades in this fight. Because at the end of the day, solidarity is, really I think solidarity has became more of a thoughts and prayers kind of statement. Something really bad happens to someone, you're like, oh, solidarity. You need to do more than that. You need to put your flag up of like, I am here from this group and I'm here doing activism in support of you. And we need to make that the more common definition of solidarity. It's not thoughts and prayers. It's not sorry. It's something a lot more than that. And just to go to Susan's point, yeah, this is fascism. For example, only a couple of days ago, Mary Miller called this decision a victory for white life. And the reason why she said that is because fascists are really concerned about the majority of white people not being a majority anymore, not just in America, but countries all around the West. And that is really what this is about, trying to protect white life. So, this is fascism, but also in Britain at the moment, we have other, common signs of this. The Rwanda concentration camps, the moral panic around trans people, travellers' life being criminalised, the police bill outlawing protests. Mary Black, an SNP MP, talked about the F word and how it was almost here in Parliament. And it was a very, impressive speech. It got shared. But the only criticism I would make to her on it is it's already very much here. It's not something around the corner. It's something that is coming straight towards us and staring us in the face. And we need to be conscious of that. We absolutely need to. So yeah, very depressing answers, but that's my answer, sorry.
Thanks, Beth. Okay. Let's see who else wants to come in. I can see Alison.
Hello, thank you for having me. And this has been wonderful because it's a little, as someone who's turning 60 this year and who's been around these protests for a long time, it's been very disconcerting to not see bodily autonomy as a major subject of public discourse by activists and programs teaching what the hell does it even mean? Because a lot of people don't know. You can say the phrase bodily autonomy to people and they don't even know what you actually mean, much less understand how fundamental it is to any concept of democracy or liberty. So it's refreshing to hear that come up. So thank you for that. I wanted to ask if anybody knew, and I see that there are some strikes being planned for 4th of July here in the US. And I wondered if anybody knew if there was any kind of growing movement that was going to give us strikes of the magnitude of, say, what happened in Iceland when they had all the women went on strike from everything, or the type of strikes we see in France where they persist and persist and persist. And they don't just go out for one day and go, ooh, we had 100,000 people out there. They don't go back to work and they keep the roads blocked until something gives. And I haven't seen that kind of persistence here. And I'm wondering if anybody knows of any organizing that's going on that looks like it would be generating that kind of persistence. That's it. Thank you again.
Thanks, Alison. I see there's been a bit of a dialogue going on in the chat. I don't know, Diane, do you want to come in and talk about what is going on, what you know about what's going on in the unions in the States? Are you only able to use the chat, Diane? She hasn't got a microphone, so we're going to have to follow her comments and in the chat. Simon?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Simon from Anti-Capitalist Resistance. Yeah, thanks. It's been a really great meeting and really great introductions from everyone. And yeah, there's so much to say, but I just wanted to kind of pick up on some of the points people have made about the Democrats and some of the very justifiable criticisms of them. And it's, sorry, I'm kind of, there's a bad lighting. I look like I'm in the witness protection program. Anyway, yeah, sort of, and I think people are very angry with the Democrats, and it's completely justifiable because, you know, they've been manipulating the concern around Roe versus Wade for decades now to get people to vote for them. And actually didn't really do anything that it would take to really defend abortion rights in the United States. And I mean, I've got friends in the US who are upset because, you know, the day that Roe versus Wade got overturned, or the statement was made, a lot of Democrat kind of local, you know, chapters just sent out emails like fundraising emails saying, well, give us money to pay for the next election. And obviously people were sort of quite upset about that because it just looked like electioneering by the Democrats, and it looked like they were piggybacking off, you know, the back of very legitimate concerns. But then when they did have the presidency, or they did have even a slim majority in the Senate, they didn't really do anything with it to actually secure abortion rights across the United States. And so this is kind of the bitter fruit of that, you know, of that like decades of failure, really. Which is why I just think it's so important to build these movements from below. And it's been really amazing seeing all the protests and the networks that are being built, and you know, such a broad force coming out around this, and, you know, kind of bringing the argument much more front and center, and also over the quality of abortion, and, you know, who can get it, and term limits. You know, these are all such huge issues that are, sort of like needed to be discussed and fought for and kind of clarified. And yeah, so yeah, I just wanted to make a kind of a, you know, like a critical point really about the Democrats, because I think that like lots of people look to them as, you know, the left alternative to the Republicans. And I mean, don't get me wrong, in some ways they are, but it's such a, you know, yeah, like, you know, they're not a real left alternative, or that, you know, they're not a very like democratic or progressive alternative in reality.
Thanks. So, Simon, I just come in say a couple of things myself. I mean, firstly, just on term limits, as somebody who did have a late abortion, I think it's really important to recognize that, I mean, it's a long time ago, but it was a situation where I thought I knew what my rights were. I did know what my rights were. There was a strike. So I couldn't go to an NHS clinic, and it was just very complicated. And, you know, all of the stuff about term limits assumes that everything goes smoothly, and it doesn't. So I think that's incredibly important to recognize. And just in terms of trade unions, I mean, I do think that the unions in Britain were won to the abortion issue over a long period of time, but I do think it's going to be incredibly important in the States to try and build that dynamic. and what people are saying about July the 4th sounds really interesting. I don't know if there's anything we can do. July the 4th is very soon, but if there's anything we can do in a symbolic way to kind of mark that, it's a day that we don't think about terribly much here, but it is a big symbolic moment in US politics, and I think maybe we should think about some solidarity action. But if nobody else wants to come in, I'll bring the speakers back. Oh, yeah. I'll bring the speakers back to conclude. Yes, don't worry, Kerry, I'm not going. So over to you, Kerry.
Sorry, I just wanted to I was going to come in on the solidarity action. So I take your point about the 4th of July. We ended up plumping for the 9th of July because that's when the Women's March are organising a lot. And we had this problem where there's sort of clashing dates as well in May. But we think Saturday is a good day. We want it to be as big and bold as possible, and we don't want people to be sort of divided up by different little demonstrations. So that's why we opted for Saturday the 9th. I've just been finalising the newsletter that we're going to put out tomorrow, so the social media will be awash with that. Please follow our social media for notices about that and join in with the solidarity action. But there will be a summer of rage, and we will also be using the opportunity to consolidate our rights here as well. I think that we have a duty to make sure that we don't lose the lessons that have put the US in this situation here. I think that we should act in solidarity, but send a strong message to those here that might want to be rolling back our rights as well, because we know that they're out there.
Thank you so much, Kerry. Beth?
Hi there. I would just want to say thank you very much for having me again to sort of describe the sort of intersectionalities. I think this is like a very intersectional issue. There's intersectional oppression that's applied here, and it needs an intersectional fight back as well. And I just want to say that as a trans woman, like I will back to my dying breath for the right of my sisters to be able to get an abortion, and it is nobody else's decision. We need to not only just to show solidarity and defend what's happening over in America, but we need to decriminalize abortion here. We need to get buffer zones here all around the country in the UK, because everyone has a right to healthcare. And then just some final points, just to respond to sort of Simon's points on the Democrats, is that neoliberalism has failed us in this. Neoliberalism has sort of given us, lied to us the idea that you all get a guaranteed chance of individual freedom, or at least the freedom of opportunity rather than the freedom of outcome. That's a lie. It's an absolute lie. The idea of a third way has failed us both in the UK as well as the US. And then there's some really interesting chat in the chat, funnily enough, around this sort of the points that people are like, oh, don't react to violence sort of rhetoric. I want you all to remember that it's the people in power that are able to define what is violent or not. And that includes your self-defense. In my view, this isn't attacking anyone. This is about your self-defending your rights, your self-defending against fascism, and we shouldn't be tolerant to intolerance. So I just want to leave with that. Once again, thank you honestly for inviting me along, and I really hope that we come at this better. Thank you.
Thanks, Beth. Zora?
I guess my parting words would just be, well, first of all, thank you guys so much for having me. This has been seriously amazing. It's really crazy to hear like what's going on over there. It's hard. I don't know how to like explain it. Like it's not easy or every day that you get to talk to a group of activists from around the world fighting this same good fight. But that is what I want to end with is please continue to fight. Like, please continue to stay in contact. Keep me updated. I'll keep you updated. Like, we really need to do this hand in hand. And I do think that international pressure is really going to be like one of the key next steps. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all our speakers. Thank you to everybody for coming. I think it's been a really powerful evening, and these conversations will continue as to how we can strengthen the links that we've consolidated tonight, and we'll make sure that everybody gets the video, everybody gets the chat, and everybody must sign up to abortion rights to find out what we're doing here. And just to pick up on Pete's final point in the chat, I won't be in London on the 9th because I shall be at the Durham Miners Gala, which is one of the biggest working class gatherings in Britain. And we really need to make sure that we have abortion rights material up there and that we try and get a speaker on, because these are exactly the sort of places that we need to be taking this fight to. Good night, everybody, and see you on the barricades.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. It's been really amazing. Thank you. And I'll be there, Kerry. Don't worry. We'll figure this out. We'll get the units up. Don't worry. We're doing this together. We'll do it.